Hey everybody, what's up? It's Booksy. Today is Monday, October 23rd. It's going to be like a weekly outlook for AMC. Maybe a little bit of SPY put in there too if we can get to it. I want it to be a quick video. This is for a lot of people who like to listen. I know they like just want levels and understanding what's going on without having to watch the stock. And I think that's a good thing, to try to put that forward. I'm going to start with a screenshot. This was taken back on the October 10th or 11th. It says 10/11, so I guess it's the 11th, but pretty sure like this setup was something that I was looking at. And when we talk about that pullback, we were talking about from 1080 up to 1115. The reason I'm looking at this screenshot is sometimes as the chart goes forward, things change a little bit, and then sometimes they don't. But like most of the time when they change like just barely, you know what I mean? So I want to go back really quick and just recap the thesis for this pullback, which was that we were going to get like a 50% retrace. There was 1, 2, 3 spots that identified, 3 lows here that you could make that 50% move. We did hit one of those 50% markers when we hit 1115. That was one of the ones that we had talked about. And it's a 50% pullback to come back to the top of the range here, which is just above 910. And when we look at this on the whole, this just looks like an LPS, like a last point of support. But in a lot of ways, this is kind of like a major SOS motion because we did have a minor one here when we took off. But then we've come back down and we've retested that level multiple times since then. And you can see when we came back, the formation's more like that classic cat ear shrinking iteration look. The M crosses haven't made any lower lows. They've been slightly higher each time. So this was a higher bottom, this was a higher bottom, which would give you the impression that you're already on the upside. But the thing is like we haven't really broken the creeks yet. Now, this particular chart doesn't even look like we're touching anything right here. But I've got another one that shows pretty distinctly that we've been bonking our heads on it. We'll get to that one in a second. As we've kind of pushed up to the upside and had these little distributive tops, we've been rejecting on that major breakout. So at this point, we've come back down. My estimation was we would end up around $9 on Friday, and that's where we were. 908 is really right on the dot. I mean, it's right on the top. So it's not unusual that that's where we ended up. Okay. Now, the rest of this formation, this idea was like once you get across the creek, and even before then to some degree, but once you get across the creek, you're going to be the major creek, right? The major downtrend on this pullback, you're going to be doing that accumulation. Well, we jumped that early downtrend pretty fast. I mean, that happened probably like a couple days after this. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't look like there was that much more. We did have some push up to the upside here that went a little farther. Then we came really, really fast straight down. And so at this point, I'm not 100% positive, but I want to say that I think we've already kind of made that major push up. That was the big one. And that one was expected. And then we've come back down and now we're doing those M crosses, or we're trying to do those M crosses. We haven't been super successful just yet in doing those. The rest of this week is going to be basically just watching to see if we can get over that creek, watching to see what the lows are. Because remember, the point of this wasn't just, we need a 50% retrace. Like, let's just do that. It was, we're coming back to low liquidity for 1. We're coming back to the top of the previous range for 2, which is like a back test. It's a way of backing up to the creek to test it. And the creek, I think, goes pretty low. I mean, we talked about like 880 something, 886. There's even like a lower point, if it takes a little longer, it could come back down pretty far. And you can see that the liquidity gap that we've made really runs from maybe like 850 all the way up to 9, and that's a pretty big area. And we really haven't traded almost at all from like 875 up to 9. You can see that area is really, really light in terms of how much we've actually traded. So it would not surprise me to see that drop down and that little M as we cross that area. So this is the very first one I drew. And later I kind of came back and was like, all right, let's do a more precise, version of this. I'm not going to pull up every single chart that I've done. But suffice to say that we've been making those strides. Let me see if I can get my... We'll talk about SPY's breakdown here in a minute. But I want to get this chart pulled up. This is a 15-minute chart. It's taking a second to load. There it is. So the idea here, and this is the one that I've been following pretty closely because this is like the first creek that was created. You see we're kind of pushing down. We're creating this kind of almost like an inverse beak formation. And I don't worry too much about a breakdown right here, but I do think it's not 100% necessary. So this is kind of the more, I guess you could say, detailed arrangement. We talked about it on Friday a little bit in the Discord group. If you guys haven't already joined that, just reach out to me on Discord and I will get you hooked up. Just let me know why you want to join, and we'll go from there. So this particular motion right here, this like little M down bottom, this move should happen beneath this particular trend. If you draw a trend from September 28th up through October 4th, and so it did hit again on October 19th, right around, I want to say 898 or something like that. And then we dropped through it on Friday right around 922. This is where I'd like to see that pick me up, where it kind of comes down as low as it's going to go, whether that's coming really low, to get to that lower creek area, or if it's just holding for what it's worth right here, or even slightly below here. This is okay. It's not the end of the world. You can see that the most important trend, which is this green pocket, that's where all the support was built. That just needs to be recaptured before we head out. So I'm a little bit optimistic. I don't know. I'm going to say that it doesn't come below. I don't think it needs to come below like the 890s. And really, once it makes a lower low, it's technically a spring. So it doesn't need to be like super dramatic. The reason that I'm not so confident that it won't be super dramatic is because of just the lack of liquidity that's been traded. Okay. So all that being said, we'll see how it shakes out this morning. So far, so good. So far, it's been doing pretty much what's expected. And once we drop, there's the red line that we were talking about. That's what I wanted. This is the one that was like more major for me. Once we drop over this guy, or jump over this guy, I think we're going to see a pretty big push to the upside. We just haven't done that yet. And right now, that break, as the crow flies right above us, would be 939. Later in the day, it could be much lower, right? By the end of the day, or even midday today, we could be looking at it being more in like the 920s. I do think the best case scenario here is we get that low, maybe it's around 894 or something like that, and then we come back up, we retest 908, and then we go to the upside. Okay? All right? Yeah, 897 was the previous low, and then the lowest point this has hit is 896 is what it looks like. So 895, 894 would be fine, and it would be about a hit right on that support. So it would be a good little spring action, and then we could possibly see that big push to the upside, in which case you're just going to get those J's. They look like J's when they're going up, but I still think of them as like the M shapes because they're just pushing against the creek, pulling back, pushing over it, pulling back, pushing over it. And that's what I would expect. So sometime between now and Wednesday would be, at least timing-wise, what I would suspect is most likely. It's not impossible if this comes back up without making a spring that we still see a spring later. So I know that the way I have it drawn is just going out. I think it'll be explosive because I think we're in the middle of a bigger move. I think this is a reaccumulation. I don't think this is like a really long formed range. But yeah, it's possible if we don't make that lower low that this could technically come back up and then come down again like so and make a lower low later. In which case, frankly, this is going to be a long drawn out week. We're not there yet, so I'm not going to say that that's going to happen, but I would much prefer that we get this low today. Would be ideal for us. And that to me would be a pretty strong confirmation that we're going to have continued upside as opposed to coming down again. Okay. On the 15-minute, RSI has cooled off. You look like you've got that cat ear, formed. So it's ready to go. Just need to recapture these trends, specifically this orange guy I think will be a big one, and then breaking over this downward red creek again. Intersection of those is around 9.30, so $9.30. So going up on the RSI, it looks like we got some room to go down a little bit on the 30-minute. There's not much to say. We're pushing up right now in after hours. We're having a big push to the upside, so we'll see what that does. 1 hour, to me, this looks like, frankly, that it's still got some room to drop. This looks a little bit like a LSPY almost, like it's come down and chopping sideways. It's kind of like a bear flag, and it's trying to get that last like big drop down. Do we need it? No, because in theory, and I talked about this a little bit last week, yeah, this could be like a head and shoulder that's going to come down, in which case, yeah, we could be risking coming really low if it takes forever because this creek comes down really far. But we ran like 46% on when the 2 hours at 50, and we were down here at like $8. We ran all the way up to 10, and I mean, and beyond, right, 11. So when we look at the picture in that way, there's not really any precedence to go any lower. Like there's no need to go any lower. When I look at something like the 4 hour, same deal. It's like, yeah, this looks a little bit bearish in some ways, but it also just looks like it's kind of like pressing down and getting narrow, which is more of like a falling wedge. And I could see a reversal here being pretty strong. Same deal, right? When we cross that 50 on the RSI, this thing pushed some 50%. And I think I made a point of this last week. I'll just make a point of it again. Is if you go to the top of the previous range and you go up to the top of that gap here, which is around 1350, you can see that we actually made like that 50%. So a 50-50 swing from here to the top, the previous top, the one that we made at 11:15, all the way up to 13. That's a even 50-50 in terms of percentage. And it's about a 50% move. So I think we've got enough space to do this move. I think we've got enough in the tank. I think the main question isn't so much like, for me, RSI or anything. And I had EMAs and stuff I was watching as well. For the most part, we're kind of coiled between the 180 and the 90 on EMAs. And that's just kind of where we are. But I think that the big picture here is the sort of the idea of like, well, are we going to get that spring or not? And I think ideally we get it before we jump this creek, but we'll see. So I'm going to watch today. If this comes back down low, I think we're going to see that little M pattern form. And then my hope is at that point we're done. So if it does break to the upside and it leaves a gap, I would just be really cautious and say that, yeah, it could possibly come back down later. There's just no telling at that point. So you then need to have to watch confirmations. Anything that looks like an SOS, so that'd be breaking over like 980 and holding support here, and then breaking over 1026 and holding support here. Those two levels would be pretty key to confirming upside. Okay? So to summarize, I still think we could get a few pennies below that previous low. I think we want to get to like 894 or slightly below. Anything lower than that, it's not bad. It's just what it is, right? But that would be nice, to get down there and then to reaccumulate in the upper eights and then push up. Once we jump that creek, the intersection, or I should say maybe even the confirmation of that, it's kind of where we dropped off on Friday. It's around $9.30. So that'd be a good place to kind of confirm if you're just kind of waiting for a good entry passively. And then a more strong confirmation would be pushing up above 980 and holding that, and then pushing up above ultimately like 1050 and holding that. And that's going to be about half the move at that point. So I'm really just kind of watching that creek and seeing where it crosses. RSI looks pretty good on almost all time frames. I'm not really seeing any strong need for more cool off. There could be some room more to the downside. But I think this is going to be like a shallow S-curve. I don't think it's going to be a full-on S-curve down. And if it was, we'd have a whole nother conversation. I'd have to do a different video because we'll talk about like how low could it possibly go kind of thing. And I guess just spitballing it, you're looking at this 830 level. That would be the last kind of major support you'd have to be sure that you catch. So looks like it's setting up for a good week though. So far so good. Everything looks okay. I'll do a recap video maybe after today talking about the rest of the week. But that's all I got for you right now. Hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.